Hey, welcome to the Kingdoms Podcast. My name is Luke and I host this with my buddy Matt Ma. And our goal is to empower you to discover how your faith impacts culture for God's kingdom. To do that, we're sitting down with different men and women from all kinds of disciplines to uncover how they, through their ambitions and vocational skill set, make a difference in the lives of those around them. And so if this is helpful to you, we'd love it if you could like it, share it, and subscribe. In the meantime, enjoy today's episode. Well, hey friends, thank you again for joining us for another episode of Kingdom and Culture. I'm here with Leighton Walters. Leighton, thanks so much for joining us.
G'day. It's my pleasure to be here.
So good. Guys, Leighton is a friend I met through a friend, Nicole, and he moved to Canada about just over a year ago. Is that right, Leighton?
Yeah, a little bit over, I think nearly 13 months.
Yeah.
Wow, it's gone quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. And he's into some exciting entrepreneurial efforts that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I wanted to invite Leighton here because he's got an incredible story and really looking forward to sharing that with you today. But Leighton, before we dive into that, just give us a quick snapshot. As somebody who was born and raised in Australia, what would you say you love about being Australian, or you love about the country of Australia?
Oh man, like Australia is just a beautiful place, like so well rounded. It's got all of the good things, but I miss the good coffee. I miss my local dumpling place. But I think mostly I miss my family and friends. I think it's something about being able to just jump in the car, drive down the road and see a mate, go to the beach, have a barbecue, do all of the things that are just in arm's reach. But ultimately, like there's no reward without risk. There's no there's no ability to be able to pursue God without an element of faith. And so being here is where God has me for now, and I'm pursuing that, and I'm excited about all that's ahead. But yeah, I miss Australia. I think Australians are one of the most loved people, I think, in the world, which is nice.
Where specifically in Australia are you from? Remind me.
So I'm from Sydney, which is on the southeast coast, not all the way south, but on the southeast coast. And about a year and a half ago, my family moved to Noosa, which is more central on the east coast, which is near Sunshine Coast and Sunrise Beach, and one of the most beautiful parts of Australia. Most people retire there. But there's like 7 Mile Beach, and there's just stunning right on the ocean. But that's where my family live. But now I'm in Toronto, where 40 degrees would shut down everything, whereas 40 degrees everyone just goes to the beach in Noosa. So
people are like, it's time to surf. Yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. So growing up in Sydney, and I know, Leighton, I've had the privilege of reading some about your story, but for people who maybe haven't heard as much about who you are, or really, what the first few decades of your life has held, if they knew something, they would just say, oh, Leighton's this Australian, he's come to Canada, he's launching this business in Toronto. He's kind of an ambitious entrepreneurial person. You actually have a really remarkable story that began with this like fight to survive just for life itself. And so I wonder, just to the extent that you're comfortable, could you share that a little bit with us, what the health battles that you faced and overcome look like for you, especially as a young person?
I guess, and in the short version is that I was born with a birth defect, locally termed spina bifida, which is usually where part of your spinal cord is exposed at birth, and usually you're paralyzed, to have some brain damage, potentially other symptoms and issues as well. But I was born with a condition called spina bifida, where my stomach was split open, and basically I was 4 weeks premature, born dead. I shouldn't have survived. I remember hearing stories from my mum, who basically obviously gave birth to me, and then I was ripped from her and put in an ambulance and taken to another hospital because the doctors had no idea that I would be able to survive, let alone be able to walk. So they saw me being able to move my legs, which is insane because most people with my condition can't. And so all of that sort of stuff. But born with a condition called spina bifida, went through all these different surgeries to help kind of put me back together again.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I guess from there, it was always an uphill battle, like fighting to survive, whether it be, you know, physically, in terms of, you know, medicines and other things, other conditions. Like today, like up to date, I've had 63 hospital admissions.
Wow.
You know, I've lost a kidney. I've got 2 screws in on my spine, to help me walk. I help me walk straight. I could always walk, but help me walk straighter. But yeah, I guess health battles have been something that I'm no stranger to, but it's actually made me who I am today. It's made me stronger, more resilient, more purposeful, more intentional, more driven, more focused, and almost giving me a sense of, want to change the world and make every day count, because every day actually does count,
Yeah.
um, when you shouldn't be alive. And so, yeah, I guess for me, that's the health battle side of things. But then obviously, as you head into schooling, it births other challenges in terms of, trying to fit in and make friends, and the emotional fallout of what that looks like as well. But yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. That could be like a book or a story in itself. That's one of those moments where as you start sharing,
Mm.
as even though I'm like hosting, I just want to I just want to listen. I don't want to say anything. I just want to, because that's to
Well,
be where you are and to have persevered through what you've persevered through is, man, is so significant. And yeah, you
thanks,
you
man.
touched on this a
God's
sec.
kind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, really kind. And often we take it for granted if we don't face adversity. But yeah.
Mm.
But you touched on this a minute ago, Leighton. You said there was some adversity you faced in school and stuff. And I wonder if you could maybe expand on that a little bit. I know for a lot of people listening to this, and well, just many people, but that's part of their life experiences, this moment of like, or moments of feeling ostracized for whether it's a physical feature or the sound of their voice or a lack of ability or a preference for a certain subject in school. A lot of people can feel rejected, as if there's something about them that's inherently like unworthy of closeness and connection and relationship. And yeah, for you, and as a student, as an elementary school student, as a high school student, what was the impact of bullying on your life, and how did you overcome that?
Um, I guess it's a difficult topic to talk about, because I think,
Yeah.
you know, it still rears its ugly head. You know, I'm 33 years old. I finished school back when I was 18. Like to me, um, I think bullying changes as you get older. Like there's different
Mm.
people, even as a 33-year-old, that you can tell people just have prejudices against things. I remember, meeting someone in school that was in a wheelchair, and he actually felt sorry for me because I looked normal. He said, when you see somebody in a wheelchair, you know that they're different. You know already that they've got challenges and that they've, you know, got some disabilities. Whereas for me, I looked normal, and
Mm.
so the amount of friends that I had lost and the amount of relationships that I had lost, and, all of that was heartbreaking. Like, so I guess for me, in terms of bullying, I've just I've just learned pretty early that people criticize what they don't understand.
Appreciate you mentioning that, because you just touched on a minute ago adversity that you faced in school due to bullying, and I think a lot of our listeners can really relate to that. And so you're on this journey. You've been born with this life threatening condition, had multiple surgeries, overcome that. You're alive, which is incredible. But now you're stepping into school and you're navigating life. I'm guessing with certain restrictions on sports you can play and things like that, uh, because of physically what your body's been through. And obviously with that there can come this really unfortunate and hurtful element of bullying, which people sometimes face, whether it's due to, you know, their ethnicity, whether it's due to them just, you know, loving something like playing the violin when other people don't, whatever it may be. A lot of people can relate to bullying. And so I'd value if you're open to it, just unpacking that a little bit for us. What was that experience like for you as a student, and how did you work through it or struggle to overcome it?
Well, it's a great question, and it's something that I think, is still prevalent even today. Like you know, not going to lie, like it's really easy to see that bullying still exists in different forms. in
Mm,
the workplace, in the world in which we live, in politics, in every area of life. I think bullies happen, like they just get older. I don't think you kind of graduate from it.
mm,
I think you just graduate and you grow and you just deal with different tensions and challenges that people throw at you. And it actually is more of an identity question than anything else. Like, I think I remember, like, very early on in when I started to, really the bullying started to intensify, people were criticizing my condition. They were criticizing what they didn't understand. And so I think it's, for some crazy reason, people often just make fun of the things that are different. They make fun of the things that they don't have. And
mm.
whether that's from a place of jealousy or whether that's from a place of their own insecurity, or whether it's just from a place of hate, like, and hurt people. And I think often earlier on in from the bullying side of things, the identity question is always part of that conversation. Like, we're often asking, I had to ask myself, I was like, am I actually, am I a humpback whale? Emotionally, I think it does get you to a place where you need to start to ask ask yourself the question, am I who they say I am?
Mm.
Or am I who someone else says I am?
Yeah.
And that tension is something that we face uh, almost daily. For some people, it's hourly. For some people, it's every minute. And so, the whole identity question that comes from a place of bullying is actually has helped me answer that question really early on,
Mm.
where I didn't have to get swept up in trying to fit in and belong and change, and by the grace of God, it was used to be able to propel me into a conversation and a dialogue around identity very early on,
Mm.
which helped me to become more resilient and helped me to become stronger, to develop a thick skin and a soft heart, and to ask the questions earlier about, what is faith? What do I believe?
Yeah.
Not just about others, but what do I believe about myself? Um, as well, and what do I believe about my faith? Because whether we believe it or not, faith frames everything that we
Yeah.
do. So yeah, I guess that's how I kind of overcame it. The bullies very easily could have turned my birth defect into a life defect, but by the grace of God, it actually helped propel me into a place where I, now see my birth defect as an opportunity to be able to bring life to people, and as great story and inspiration, and hopefully to be able to make a difference and point more people to the cross.
Yeah.
Um, olive oil only exists when the olive is pressed,
Mm.
and so we need to go through a little bit of stuff to be able to let the good stuff come out. And I think ultimately, even though people are in school and they are getting bullied, and that still happens today, if you can frame it in a way where you can actually start to answer the questions about deciding, am I who they say I am, or am I who someone else and who God says I am, then that helps you start to work on your identity question early on, and then be stronger in the long term. So
Yeah.
that when other people start to doubt your identity or question all of that, you're able to actually answer that question easily, rather than still carry those insecurities and those baggages that you bring from high school.
Yeah. Can I ask, and Leighton, really appreciate your openness on that front, because so many people, especially as they enter into adulthood, have incredible insecurities in large part due to what they go through in high school. It's almost like it can be a season that is defined by either people being launched into their future and pursuing their ambitions and their big dreams, or just feeling crippled and like really held back. And if you were to point to one thing that you would say, I really anchored myself in this. I know you talked about your identity in Christ, and maybe a further detail into that, like one thing that you would encourage listeners just to anchor themselves in, especially whether they're in high school or young adulthood, which can be equally as messy in its own right, or another season of life. What would you say? Like, man, like anchor yourself here.
Well, here's the thing: is that I think everybody's floating through life, looking for somewhere to anchor their boat. And ultimately, you either anchor it on what you believe in your own, your own view on faith and your own view on the world, um, or you find purpose and hope in the cross of Calvary and in Jesus and who he says that he is. And therefore, if he was and he is who he said he is, then that makes me who he says I am. And I think you can't, so many people believe in Jesus, but they forget the flow on effect of that, of who Jesus says I am.
Hmm.
So whilst my life should not be taking away from the beauty and the glory and the majesty of Jesus and the cross, it should actually be an echo of that. And it should be a mirror reflection of that. So I think anchoring myself to Christ at a relatively young age, because I grew up, I didn't encounter the love of God until I was 21. So I grew up kind of relatively atheistic in worldview, doing my own thing, not really wanting to believe. But then I got to a point where I started to doubt my doubts. And I think from that place, I started to realize that what I was anchoring my life to really was thin air. It had no substance. I was just floating around to whoever would show me affection and attention. So I think anchoring, like once I met Jesus, anchoring my life and my calling and my worldview and my desires and my purpose around him, that had changed and added such an element of purpose and hope and color, almost like the lights get switched on in everything that you do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean by that? Like it's hard to describe unless it's actually happened. Like whenever I talk to atheists or not yet believers, like I'm asking that, they're like, oh, how can you believe it's just a crutch? And I'm like, well, actually it takes, more faith to believe that you're sitting in no chair than you're sitting in a chair. People have faith in the fact that there's a chair, right? They're going to sit in, it's going to hold and retain. But you remove, you think that in the beginning, nothing was created and you sit, you know what I mean? So it's a bit of a different viewpoint. So I think it takes more faith to believe in no God than it does to believe that there is a God, but that's beside the point. Anyway, sorry, did I answer your question or did I
Yeah,
get
no,
off topic a
100%.
little?
Actually, no, man, it's good. It's good. And just to ask on that, Leighton, like, how'd you get there? Because you're growing up in a family that isn't following Christ. You said yourself you were basically an atheist, and then 21 isn't often the point of conversion. Usually at 21, people are partying or trying to live their best life or
Yeah.
trying to find themselves in some respect. And so you find yourself pursuing the embrace of a relationship with Jesus at 21. Like, why on earth did that happen then? Or who was a part of that?
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, to be honest, I thought it was really, really funny that I, ended up basically becoming a Christian at 21 because I think my family had Christian values, but we didn't go to church. We didn't really do anything that was active in any sort of religious sense. I went to a high school that was, a religious high school. So we kind of forced to go to chapel and we were forced to go to Bible studies and that sort of stuff. But to me, it was, just pointless because it wasn't, God was more of an idea or an ideology than an individual, someone that I could know and be in relationship with. And so I guess after going my own way and sort of following the things that the world says that would bring me joy and would bring me happiness and acceptance and belonging. Like we're all searching to love and to be loved. That is the fundamental desire of the human heart, to be fully known and fully loved. And if you think about it in its most purest form, the only being, the only essence, the only person that can actually fully know you and fully love you is God. And so that invitation was not presented to me in a very, until I was 21 years old. So in the midst of all of the night clubbing and amidst to kind of hopping from relationship to relationship and, trying to find a sense of connection and a sense of community, I found that, I would have the bank balance. Like I'd have a great job, I'd have a great title, I'd be popular in the nightclubbing scene. I used to promote for nightclubs, like the longest running nightclub in the world. I used to, I never did drugs. I never did any of that stuff. But I was searching for love. Like I was searching to belong. I was searching for community and connection. And ironically, it wasn't until I went into real estate for a season of life where my family kind of needed my help. We had our family business, where I had some braces put on, and I talked to everybody. Like, if you know me for more than 5 minutes, you know that I'm a relatively friendly guy, or at least I try to be. Um, I like to talk to people I've never met, providing that they are friendly enough. Like, there's some pretty interesting people that I've met in my
Yeah.
life that are less friendly, but um, anyway, all I'm trying to say is I had braces put on, and then I made friends with the orthodontist nurse. She invited me to church. I was like, well, I guess I've got Sundays off now, because I used to always be in hospitality, used to always be in coffee. And I was like, okay, I'll just come along. And um, I walked into a service, and it was completely different. Like, it felt almost as if that either I had walked into, like, it was like this room that was just full of peace. It was
Mm.
like this room that was just full of love, and this genuine, authentic sense of worship, and a hunger for God. And it genuinely, like, hands were raised, and people were actually singing. They weren't just sitting at the back miming along the words on the screen like I was used to in chapel. They were genuinely engaging with worship. And I actually walked in, and I was like, either I'm wrong, or all these people here are really messed up. Like, so, so,
That's amazing.
so either, and I was heavily outnumbered, and I was like, I started to doubt my doubts. I was like, maybe God is real. Maybe he's different. Maybe I haven't been really honored. And then I started to ask more questions, and I started to continue to come back to church and allow myself to be in that environment again. And I started to think about what I believe, and the grounding and the anchoring of what came along with that. And then I got to a place where I just felt like I had the popularity, I had the money, I had the bank balance, I had the, at that stage I was looking at buying my first property. I had all of the things that the world told me that I needed in order to be happy, or to feel loved, or to belong. And it just left me empty. It just left me with nothing. And I woke up every morning after going out and, like, partying around, and meeting all these different people, and feeling like special because certain people that were more popular than me paid attention to me. But I woke up the next morning, I'm like, this is so empty. This doesn't add anything to my life. This does, like, I'm still waking up the next morning going, there's nothing here. Like, and so it led me to a position where I was just like, you know what? Like, clearly there's more to what than meets the eye. Clearly there's more and there's this sense of there has to be more to life than this. Because there are people that have all the money, and have all of the popularity, and have all of these belongings and all this stuff, that do struggle with, and that in depression, and do struggle with all of these things. So it's like, if money made you happy, then why are people with the most money so sad?
Mm.
Like, if houses and big nice cars somehow bring value to your life, then why are the people with the nice cars and the big houses, why are they some of the most unhappiest people in the world? And so I'm like, there's got to be a deeper element, and deeper, I guess there's got to be a deeper desire for something more than those things. And so, yeah, I started to, I remember having a moment where I was broken, where all of a sudden, God became real to me. It wasn't an idea, it was an individual. And I surrendered, and I repented, and I still repent. Like, I think repentance is not just a one-time thing. I think it's
Mm.
a reoccurring, constant, like, okay, God, I surrender. I turn from my way, not my will, but thy will be done. And so it's been this constant journey from there, of unlearning all of the things that I thought that I knew, and relearning the things that I, now know to be true,
Mm.
through the Word of God, through good counsel, through constantly developing my faith in a sense of community, not just by myself or doing my own thing. Like, yes, there's private devotion, but it should also be exercised through community, and being able to outwork and talk about your faith. And so yeah, I guess now, being where I am today, I kind of look back going, wow, 12 years ago now, that 12 years I've been a Christian,
Yeah.
and I never would have imagined that I would be able to be where I am today and be a part of, the Emmanuel Barry extended family, I guess, through Nicole and her friendship circle and the Wilcoxes and
Mm.
you and all of the amazing community. Like, who travels 2 hours to go to church on a Sunday? You know what I mean? Like, apparently I do.
Apparently
Like,
you do. And we're glad for it.
oh, mate, it was so fun. I always say to Nicole, I'm just like, you know what? I really am attracted to the fact that it's solid teaching, it's a diverse community, and it's
Mm.
beautiful in terms of the fact that it's real,
Mm.
it's genuine. It's not just church is something that should be leaving you better off than the way that you came, and it's
Yeah.
not a religious experience, it's a relational experience. And I think ultimately I found that Emmanuel was a really beautiful place
Mm.
to be a part of the church, and we still listen in every Sunday. And Kyle is a legend,
Mm.
um, who has been putting all the videos together. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's wild.
Dude, the guy's a force. Thank you for sharing that though, because that's so significant for this day and age. People that are hunting for happiness, and if they reach the top, I think they would realize, the top being possessions and
Yeah.
wealth, etc., they would
Well,
find themselves saying,
yeah, and all I
what
would
what
add to
now?
that, mate,
Yeah.
all I would add to that is, ultimately, I think people, until they've experienced God, they're following this whatever idea they think is happiness and love and acceptance. They're just running from the next thing to the next to the next thing. Ultimately, I've had to hit rock bottom, um, to realize that I needed to build my life on the rock.
Hmm.
And I think most people run from that sense of vulnerability and that sense of heartache, and they try to numb themselves with either alcohol or drugs or pornography, or they numb themselves with multiple different numbing agents in order to try and ignore the fact that they're hungry to be fully known and to be fully loved, and the only person that can offer that is Jesus. Having faith should be the only and is the best framework to be able to bring purpose, identity, and hope for the future.
Hmm.
So I think ultimately, yeah, I realized that when I look back at it, God had to break me to put me back together the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is beautifully said, because I think there's many people that find themselves in your shoes right now, or in the place you were, of having to say, maybe God's breaking me to put me back together the right way. So
A broken masterpiece.
a broken masterpiece. Yeah. I wonder, Leighton, as you're talking and you're sharing about, as a 21-year-old, being quite successful as a businessman, your family, if I'm correct, had launched this real estate business that had taken off in a few years. And most people, when they're 21, they're partway through uni and they're thousands of dollars in debt to pay for school. And you're in the total opposite place. And I realized that that's a big part of your story, is this really cool streak of brilliance in you for business and entrepreneurship. And so I wonder, could you give us just a quick snapshot of your background in that, kind of leading up to that point at 21 when you surrendered your life to Christ, but
Mm.
also how coming to Jesus Christ changed your approach to business and entrepreneurship, just how your whole sense of calling in light of who you're equipped to be was transformed through that.
Yeah, it's a big question, because ultimately I think everything that we do flows from a place of who we think we are
Hmm.
and why we're here and how we were made. So I think our faith has to be the frame in which we view everything that we do. Worship is not, 3 or 4 songs on a Sunday morning. Worship is a lifestyle. Worship is a surrender and a honoring of giving God back my hands, because his hands bled for me. Like, ultimately, that's what worship is. And I think, when I was 21, and I started working when I was 15. I went into management of a little franchise cafe at 16, and I never turned back from there. So I was working, 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 working. I was working after hours. I was, all of that sort of stuff in order to try and make something of my life. But
Hmm.
I guess I actually ended up leaving school early. So I actually didn't finish school. I was a little bit unconventional where I left school early. I wouldn't suggest it unless I left school because I had to get my kidney removed. And
That's a
that
legitimate reason.
yeah, and that took 3 to 4 months out of my life to go, and that's very hard to go back into schooling. And so I made the decision that after I had my kidney removed, I was going to try and enter the workforce full time. And solely by the grace of God, I was invited to work for a cafe as basically as a New South Wales, which is our state that I grew up in, a corporate store manager. And so I was running cafes at 17, and basically just built from there. At 21, our family business was kind of going through a bit of a rough trot, and we needed to help, and my dad needed some help. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to put hospitality to the side for a bit, and I'm going to be there for my family. And so I started to be involved in our family real estate business as a business development manager, which is basically a really nice way of saying that I would go around and I would help drum up business. But instead of sales, like selling houses or apartments, I was doing rentals.
Hmm.
And so at 21, I was building a rent roll for our family business. And I always loved people, you know what I mean? Like I always, which is ironic because in hindsight, I probably shouldn't like people as much as I do, but I just don't know. I just always have. But anyway, I remember that I went into this real estate business with my family, and I basically was like, I'm just going to rebuild this. So that's what we did. So for years, I would like door knock and I'd send letters, and I would just genuinely just love people. Like I would be real, I'd be authentic. Like every time I would meet them, I would thank them, and I would just do all of the right things that were honorable and above reproach. I wouldn't be, dodgy. I wouldn't be like, sorry, I'm using Aussie slang a
I
little
was gonna
bit, so
say,
I don't know if this
definition
makes
of
sense.
dodgy is
Is not ethically sound.
well
I
said,
guess.
well said. A
um,
little bit suspicious, like yeah.
yeah, like dodgy, like mate, like that's not right. Like just being doing all the things above reproach and doing things well and actually being a man of my word and
Mm,
integrity.
mm.
And so anyway, I like would go to and I'd help these owners rent out their property, and I'd find great tenants. I would get good pricing and all this sort of stuff. And this would all happen, and all of a sudden, like all these referrals started to happen, and I started to build this rent roll, which eventually ended up being worth $2 million
Wow.
in the space of 3 or 4 years. And I'm just like, okay. And we won, we won the best medium-sized residential agency in New South Wales.
Right on.
I started a charity called Heart for the Homeless, and I'd love to tell you more about that, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a sec. But started Heart for the Homeless, and then that led to me basically winning the John Gregg Order of Australia Medal Award for Community Service in the real estate industry, and got nominated for Young Australian of the Years for 6 years. And like all of these doors just started to open, and it's almost like as I gave my life to Christ, God just breathed on everything that I did.
Yeah.
And that framework then helped me be able to build something great, which now obviously God gets the glory for. And as I've obviously built that business and continued to go back into helping our family business, I then obviously left eventually and, went back into the hospitality and coffee side of things. As the charity grew and as my studies started to like, as my desire for studying the word started to increase, I left the real estate business. But I guess basically from a faith point of view, faith has to be the frame.
Yeah.
Has to be the frame in which you view the world. Like otherwise you're just looking around aimlessly trying to find something and find some opportunity and try and figure things out. But if you view the world through the lens of the cross, and you view your life through the lens of the cross, and if you view your leadership and your strength and the world in which God has placed you and the community in which God has placed you, if you view that through the lens of the cross and through the faith lens, you will actually find that it all just comes to life. Like everything has purpose. All of a sudden, like I'm not just going to work to make money. I'm going to work to make money and to impact people's lives and to meet people and to help them feel loved and help them feel belonging. And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
everything that you do is not just status quo. It's not just boring. It's not just for money. It's literally to be able to make the world a better place, to be a lighthouse in a dark place, to be a shining example and a testimony to what a Christ-like, faith-filled Christian can look like in the
Yeah.
contemporary world. And that throws people. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm not religious. I'm not this." I go, "Cool, you're fine. You're not religious. That's okay." I don't necessarily think that, like religion is a man-made response to existence, whereas God is desiring relationship.
Mm.
Jesus didn't come to start a religion. He came to start a relationship, between God the Father and humanity, and to restore a relationship
Yeah.
between the two. And I think that changes things. All of a sudden, you're not doing things out of religious obligation. You're doing things out of a relational love.
Hey friends, thanks so much for joining me today for my conversation with Leighton Walters. I hope you've been encouraged both by his story of what he's overcome physically, but also how Jesus Christ has impacted his life. I know that I learned a lot from his entrepreneurial insights and the ways in which he's seeking to use his skill set to make a difference in our world, and want you to be able to get connected with him. You can find Leighton on Instagram at Leighton Walters. He's also got a website, leightonwalters.com, where you can discover more about his story and what he's a part of. Also, Leighton is launching a coffee shop here in Toronto, Ontario. So if you're regional and want to visit that, or just check it out online, it's Found Coffee in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation with Leighton. I hope it's empowered you to better consider how you might live to impact culture for the kingdom of God.